All right, welcome to another episode of the Cassels Cast. My name's Eamon Cassels. Joining me today is going to be Gavriel Wilkins and Torrence Stagger of the new 24 podcast to discuss all things NBA playoffs before wrapping up by answering your questions and talking about a few hot topics around the league. So, yeah, without any further ado, let's just get into the episode. All right, joining the show now is Gabe and Torrence from the new 24 podcast. How are you guys doing today?
Doing excellent. Can't complain at all. It's a pleasure to be on as always, Eamon. Glad to have Torrance with us and, talking some basketball, especially this time of year with the playoffs heating up.
Hey man, feeling good, feeling great. Well, thanks for welcoming me to the Cassels Cast. Glad to be a part of this one.
Absolutely. Glad to have you guys on the show. And yeah, we're just going to be going over every playoff series and then talking a bit about some news around the league to wrap up the show. But yeah, first things first, I think we got to talk about the most exciting playoff series going on right now, and that's Timberwolves Spurs. Timberwolves come into San Antonio, they steal game one, and then they get absolutely blown out in game two. So do you guys feel like the Spurs figured some things out in game two and they could potentially close out the series on that note, or do you think we're still in for a super competitive series?
I believe we definitely in for a competitive series. I see this series going at least 6 or 7 games. And as I predicted on the episode me and Torrance had this week, I got the Wolves in 6, but I give a lot of credit to the Spurs for coming out like I thought they would after losing game one and Wemby coming out with a sluggish start offensively, even though he was superb defensively. If the Spurs continue to stay like connected defensively, they gonna have a lot of points in the series where they go on runs. You just worry about how they're gonna be able to execute in the half court late in games. And I think that's where Minnesota will end up having the advantage. But in game two, the second quarter really told the story of the game. And after that, it was all she wrote at that point.
Yeah, the Spurs, it's game one. Brand new series. They had a long layoff in comparison to Minnesota. And as Gabe said, half court offense. It's the difference in the two games. The Spurs' biggest weakness is they're young, and those guys individually still don't know their spots on the floor, what they do best offensively, what to do in case of certain coverages. That comes with experience and game reps. And Minnesota was able to take advantage of that in game one. You saw game two, the Spurs came out with a better plan to get easier shots. And De'Aaron Fox, I don't count on him playing as poorly as he did in game one and back to back games, especially when the series is starting at home. So I still got the Spurs in seven as of right now. I think this is going to be a back and forth series. Both teams have distinct strengths and weaknesses on both sides, and I think we'll see them all play out.
I realized I was muted. But yeah, no, I definitely agree with those points. The half court offense, especially late in games, is a big advantage for the Timberwolves. So if they can sort of keep it close, I think they do have a good path to winning. But yeah, looking at game one, I think so much went wrong for the Spurs, especially you look at the offensive production from Fox and Wemby, and I don't know how replicable that is, but I still do think the Timberwolves have a good shot of winning just because of how elite their defense is. When you look at point of attack with Jaden McDaniels and then Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle being able to limit Wemby. I think that's a big advantage, and I think that's sort of the perfect combination against Wemby. You have an elite rim protector and really an elite one-on-one defender in Gobert, and then you also have Randle who can sort of give him problems because of the physicality aspect. But yeah, in game two, I think there was a little bit of concern and signs, obviously, with the Timberwolves getting blown out. When you look at just how much ball pressure the Spurs brought, and they forced 22 turnovers, I think that's going to be a clear blueprint, and I'm really looking at the Timberwolves to match that ball pressure and sort of throw more doubles at San Antonio's ball handlers and make their somewhat weak shooters pay for that strategy. I feel like that's the best chance for Minnesota to win. They really have to make it sort of this slugfest and grudge match where they're going back and forth in these low-scoring games. I think it can be done. I definitely think the series goes 6 or 7. I'd be shocked if it's a 5-game series one way or another. But yeah, I do think the Spurs' athleticism and rim protection paired with their point of attack defense does pose a difficult matchup for the Timberwolves compared to the Nuggets, who just didn't have much defensive resistance at all. And throughout this mini run that we've seen from the Timberwolves over the last 2.5 years, they've really thrived against those weaker defenses and struggled against elite defenses. So I kind of lean Spurs at this point, but definitely can't count the Timberwolves out.
I lean
No, you can't
Spurs.
count them out at all.
I lean Spurs as well. But see, here's my thing. I think Anthony Edwards, despite being hurt, I believe he's the best player in this series. I believe he's the guy that can always get him a good shot in this series. I think he's the best offensive option within this series. So, from that standpoint, when you're talking about the games getting physical and sluggish on either side, you got to go to a guy like that, whether it's getting to the rim, hitting a three, being able to get a shot in the mid range. The Spurs, for them, you would say Fox is that guy, but Fox can be stopped with the right defensive strategy. And I think that's something the Spurs are going to have to really work around, or Wemby's going to have to accept the fact that it may need to be him consistently throughout the game, not just for short bursts.
Yeah. And to add to your point on that, Torrence, it's going to make Dylan Harper's job all the more magnified as well. Because if you stop De'Aaron Fox and Stephon Castle's not hitting shots, then you're going to need him to play that six-man role and be what you saw him in Game 3 against Portland, rising to the occasion. He's more than capable of doing that, but you're putting a lot of pressure on that rookie to be that guy. And that's the thing that makes this series so fun to watch. You got a team that's been there and done that in Minnesota, trying to make the third time the charm, going up against this youthful and fun Spurs team to watch. But you could tell at various points and times throughout this postseason that this is their first rodeo. And I hope that's something that people keep in mind. But like Torrence said, you can't count the Minnesota Timberwolves out at all, especially when you got number 5 over there that's leading the charge. And you know how much those guys feed off of them. I mean, look at the way Terrence Shannon Jr. has performed through his first 3 games as a starter, putting up double figures. Ayo Dosunmu rising to the occasion. He's going to find a way to get the most out of those guys. And that's why I think this is going to be an incredible series, especially if the stars show up on front stage and do what is expected of them alongside of the talented cast that they play beside.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that point, Torrance, that Anthony Edwards is just the best get you a bucket kind of guy in this series. And I do think for the Spurs, it's going to have to be a little bit more from Wemby offensively, especially after that game one. It was really rough for him. We know that he's the best defensive player in the world, but I think they're going to really have to rely on him scoring not just outside the arc, but inside the arc. And I think the Timberwolves' physicality can make that challenging for him. De'Aaron Fox had a really strong game too, so if he can build off that, that would be a huge relief for Wemby. But if not, they're going to be counting on Castle and Harper, like you guys said, which is sort of risky given their youth. But yeah, I think it's worth sticking with Ant for a second because he had a really strong game one, in my opinion, coming back from that knee injury. Frankly, I was amazed that he even came back this soon, but for him to come in and score 18 points, he was going at Wemby, he was making some difficult shots. He was really doing everything we saw and have been accustomed to seeing from Ant over the past few years. But then in game two, he didn't totally look like himself. He came in off the bench again. He was sort of forcing some looks, it looked like, in my opinion. So yeah, are you guys concerned at all with the injury, or do you think Ant's just sort of shaking off that rust from game two and you lean more so towards that optimistic side with the game one version of Ant is going to be the version we'll see for the rest of the series?
I think when I look at Ant and how he's performed through the first 2 games, so far so good. I mean, of course, game 2 he was forcing, but I think a lot of that was due to the byproduct of the scoreboard and knowing that in order for them to make any push, it was going to have to be in large part due to him setting the tone. And being on that road, you always want your stars to set that tone early. And with him coming off the bench, I'm pretty sure that that's thrown him off a little bit, or at least in game 2 it did, as opposed to game 1 when he came off the bench and he hit his first few shots. Then he got in a rhythm early. As long as he's able to just find his rhythm early off the bench, I don't really worry too much about him. And hopefully, as the series goes along, he can continue to ramp up in minutes. I was very surprised to see him in game one. I didn't expect to see him at all in this series until at least game 3 or 4. But to his credit, he made sure that he was resting up well and recovering well enough to give it a go. And he felt good enough and let that be known in the opener that, hey, he's ready and to rock and roll. Now, hopefully, he can keep that going because they're going to need him at home alongside of those other players to get back, and not necessarily back in the series, but get control of the series once again.
Look, they took one in San Antonio. Job was done in game one. You know,
Yeah.
personally, I'm looking at it, hey, maybe you sit at game two. I know you got to have the mentality of every game could be won, but realistically, you know what you're up against. You already got the first game. Second game didn't go the way they wanted to, but they kept him at 25 minutes. I expect his minutes to rise as the games go up in this series. Around game 5 is when I'll expect him to be back playing around 36 minutes a game. And for the T-Wolves, another guy I want to talk about, Naz Reid, coming off the bench, being that third big man. You got to outplay Luke Cornett and hit the glass. When Naz Reid hits the glass for the Timberwolves, they're very hard to beat because he has a tendency to just stick around the three-point line, which is something that they need for their offense. But on the defensive end and on the boards is where they're going to need Naz Reid. And same for Ant with that injury. I'm more concerned about his ability to guard consistently with the knee as opposed to scoring. He's going to score either way. He just has that type of game, but being able to keep up the intensity, run through screens when you're talking about guarding guys like Devin Vassell, guarding De'Aaron Fox on the pick, that's more so where the T-Wolves have to make sure Ant is right for.
Yeah, I think those are some great points there. I I do think it's sort of a one-off game for Ant, where he's just sort of shaking off the rust, and he's proven that he can be a truly elite scorer. I do think the Spurs defense can give him some challenges, but given what we saw in Game One, I think we're going to see some more big games, and I expect him to return to the starting lineup tonight. I think it's enough bringing him off the bench, starting Conley and Shannon. I think it's sort of run its course, and Chris Finch needs to just go back to playing his best 5 players in the starting lineup. But I definitely agree defensively there could be some challenges, and we also saw that in the first 2 games. But I'm really happy you brought up Naz Reid Torrence. I think I have a question along those same lines. But yeah, Naz has been really productive in this series, and he's bouncing back from sort of that nagging shoulder injury that he was dealing with. But in Game 1, we saw the Timberwolves really open things up in that fourth quarter, go into the Reed-Randall look, and throughout the season, offensively, that's been a big boon to them just based off floor spacing and shot creation. But defensively, there have been a lot of struggles, but throughout the playoffs, we've really seen them figure it out, and I think that's a credit to both Reed and Randall stepping up defensively. But yeah, sort of with the Wemby advantage and trying to pull him away from the rim, do you think we're going to see more of that Reed-Randall look, especially in closing lineups?
Definitely. I expect to see Reed, Randall, Io, Jaden, Ant. That's gonna be the best 5 that the Wolves, when they run that lineup, that's when they gotta go on their runs. That's their chance to open the floor up, switch if they need to a lot, open up the 3-point shot. And guarding Wemby it's an interesting task. It really just comes down to Wemby's mentality. No matter what the lineup is, if Wemby's in the mood to just shoot threes and stand by the free throw line, cool. Go small, take advantage of it offensively. Now, if he starts to bang you in the paint and play like he's 7'5", then you're gonna have to make some adjustments. But if I'm the Timberwolves, the Wolves have enough talent to always play offense in this series. They don't really have to let the Spurs dictate too much of what it is that they want to do. They have the talent to do whatever it is that they want to do throughout this series.
And I'm glad that you brought up Wemby and his shot selection, right? Because I feel like in Game 1, he played in the Minnesota's hands a lot by playing on a perimeter far too often, which in turn you allow Chris Fitch to basically say, okay, well, we can go small against you and run Nas Reed out there, and we get these threes up on the opposite end offensively, and if we get those shots to fall, now we have an advantage over you with your inability to make things happen in the half court consistently. So if Wemby is playing inside, then yeah, it's gonna force Gobert's hand a lot. And that Gobert and Wembanyama matchup is definitely gonna be one to monitor because those two guys know one another very well, being of the same country in France, playing against one another, and that's gonna be a cat mouse matchup where it's gonna be a lot of back and forth going on and chess matches being played.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point about just Wemby needing to get inside more, and I do think I'm a little dubious of him being able to do so. Just based off some of his stamina and what he's shown us, I think it's more of like a stamina strength issue. He's not used to playing super heavy minutes. He's obviously like a generationally great defensive player, but I still think he's not super far along offensively. And the Timberwolves' physicality, especially from Randall, has bothered him, and it bothered him in the regular season as well. I think throwing Gobert at him for like the first 3 quarters and then having Randall wear him down as the game gets going down the stretch, I think is a potential recipe for success against him. But if Wemby can, insert his dominance and score inside, I think that could change things a lot for the Spurs. It's just a matter of whether he can do it across I mean, he's not going to play all 48 minutes, but playing a heavier minute load at around that like 35-minute a game range, I think is a reasonable question. But then on the other side of the ball, I feel like he just changes so much defensively, and he just changes how the Wolves attack. I mean, we saw them going at him a bunch in that first game, but he also recorded 12 blocks, and he was totally dominant. So I do think the Wolves will have to go to more of those 5-out looks to sort of negate that advantage.
Well, going 5 out and going at Wemby is wearing him down though. You're attacking him from so many different angles, not allowing him
Mm-hmm.
to just rest in the paint and be the defensive force that he is. Because I mentioned it on our show around the time he won Defensive Player of the Year. Yeah, Wemby's great defensively, but a lot of that has to do with just pure size. You can't take that away from him, but if you can make him work defensively, he can foul just like anybody else. You get him two quick fouls. Now where is that advantage? You want to play Luke Cornett for 6-7 minute stretches? Do you want to have to do that if you're the Spurs? Probably not. So being able to attack Wemby on both ends, just make him work. Make him use that stamina. Make him get used to playing those hard playoff minutes can be to Minnesota's advantage. And Dylan Harper, that's why he's a key as well. Because he's the one guy on the Spurs I see that looks to get Wemby easy shots in the paint off the pick, throwing it down to him down low,
Mm-hmm.
not allowing him to just play around the perimeter.
Yeah, like that's they best 2 man game, and that's been evident since the preseason. If you watch San Antonio play, is that pick and roll connection between Harper and Wemby, and that's why I'm saying like he's the biggest X factor to me in this series because when you got Jay McDaniels guarding Stephon Castle, that's gonna be a tough matchup. Even though Stephon Castle is longer than most guards that he goes up against most nights, like Jay McDaniels got a longer wingspan and he's able to cover tremendous ground. So when I look at, like I say, the matchups in this series, it's gonna command your attention. And the play of San Antonio, especially their reserves and key figures like Dylan Harper, it's gonna shape this series on a lot of levels. And they're gonna have to grow up quick if they really wanna go where everybody thinks they can, which is to the NBA finals, especially in the midst of their first playoff run.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think Harper's going to be huge, and I definitely agree. He's just the best playmaker out of those 3 guards, and he's shown a lot in these playoffs. Should be super interesting to see how it plays out. And yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, it's super tough to make this jump as a young team who's never had a playoff run together. So it should be super interesting to see how the rest of the series plays out. But yeah, any closing thoughts on this series before we move ahead to Knicks Sixers? All right, so yeah, let's go ahead to Knicks Sixers. Knicks are up 2-0 in the series currently. Series going back to Philly now. with OG Anunoby's health sort of being up in the air. But yeah, what have you seen in these first two games, and do you think there's a path for Philly to make it a series? And how much of it depends on sort of OG's health going forward?
I think for Philly to make this a series, it depends on the health of Joel Embiid. In game two, they were right there, but you saw in the last 3 minutes of regulation that not having Embiid on the floor was bad for them because they didn't have anybody they could just dump it down to on the block to get them a bucket when they needed it in key spots. And as a result, they settled for a lot of jump shots. I thought Paul George was tremendous through the first 3 quarters, but in the fourth quarter, he was non-existent. And that's kind of become a big thing with him in many playoffs of recent past. And that's going to have to change if Joel Embiid's not out there on the floor. I think Tyrese Maxey, even at times, was settling for that 3 ball far too often. VJ Edgecombe has come to play. I like the minutes that they got out of Dominic Barlow. They're going to have to play him a lot more, I think, off the bench in games 3 and 4, whether Embiid is out there or not. But I believe if Embiid was out there in game 2, that they win that game. And even though he wasn't, it was a very winnable game by the way that they performed. But New York had their guy. Philadelphia didn't. And when I say New York had their guy, I'm talking about Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson, to me, his play down the stretch, hitting big shots, getting guys like Deuce McBride open looks for 3, Cat, and the others. That's what led to the victory. And OG Anunoby, if he's not able to go in these next 2 games, that's a huge loss. You talk about a guy that's been averaging 20 a game in the playoffs, shooting the lights out from 3-point land. And even though I don't expect him to reduplicate the performance he had in game 1, has been very ultra aggressive, and he's made that trade between the Knicks and Raptors look like a steal with the way that he's performed. I don't think you can doubt his presence or impact on this club, because when he's playing like that, it makes you look at the Knicks squad a lot differently compared to what you might have coming into the postseason.
Statistically, anytime a team goes down 2-0, you're supposed to hit the panic button. But the Sixers, I don't see any reason for that. Game 1, you're coming off a 7-game series. The Knicks have been rested. They're waiting. Okay, you take the loss. Game 2, you're still in New York. Joel Embiid can't play, which I think may work out for them the rest of this series. Okay, he sits game 2. You get a chance to see what you got without Embiid, because the non-Embiid minutes, whether he plays or not, will be key. Do you run the offense through Paul George during those minutes? Is it Tyrese Maxey time? Those questions needed to be answered. With OG being out, the Sixers just have to go to the best plan possible, and that's make Jalen Brunson a playmaker and get Karl Anthony Towns into foul trouble early. Getting Towns in foul trouble, not really the hardest mission if you watched him throughout his career. He's playing great, but you can get him. It's easy for Karl to have a 5-foul night, easily. And Jalen Brunson, you can't allow him to come off of picks, come off of screens, and get easy looks. You got to send a double team at him a lot, especially with OG out. If you got to lose the series because Deuce McBride hit shots and Mikal Bridges hit shots, then fine. But you can't allow Jalen Brunson to beat you.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I mean, OG's just been so essential to them on both ends of the court. He's easily their best defender. I would argue he has a case to be their second best player. I know Cat's been really solid, especially recently, but everything OG provides on defense, along with that secondary creation, and to your guys' point about the double teams, you really can't double Brunson as much with the way OG's been playing. So yeah, I think that's something that's really big to watch. We're not positive on his status just yet, but hamstring injuries can always be tricky. And then I also like the Embiid point. I think that's going to be really big. Just giving them that other offensive option, because I feel like it was so perimeter centric, like you guys were saying, in that game 2 without him, and it was just a lot on Maxey's shoulders. And the Knicks, even without OG, they do have a lot of defensive personnel on the perimeter to throw at him. So I feel like that could be a really big factor if Embiid continues to be sidelined. And then, yeah, you definitely just need a little bit more from George and VJ, especially down the stretches of these games if Embiid doesn't play. Defensively, though, I kind of like the Sixers' defense a little bit better in some ways without Embiid. Especially you look at that game too. I love the point about Dominic Barlow. I thought he was fantastic, and you could just really switch everything. And that was one thing we saw in game one. They were really going at Embiid a lot, and with the injury history he's had, he's just not as mobile. So I feel like just having that switch heavy defense in some ways does work to their advantage. I think ultimately they're obviously better with Embiid on the court, and we saw that in the Boston series as well, how dominant he is as a scorer, and he can still provide some rim protection. But personally, if and when Embiid does return, I would just try to go to those small ball lineups with Barlow at the 5 a little bit more in the non-Embiid minutes, because I think that just gives them some nice versatility and some nice switchability. But ultimately, even with OG's injury, and then that paired with sort of the uncertainty with Embiid, I do think the Knicks have a clear path to still win this series, and I would be surprised if the Sixers pulled off the upset, but who knows? I mean, they just came back from down 3-1, so they can never be fully written off, but I have pretty strong confidence in this Knicks team. Just how many options they have overall, I'd be a little bit surprised if they lost this one.
Well, like Torrence said, usually when a team is up 2-0, a lot of people want to panic. But see, the way I look at it is like this. The Knicks took care of business on their home floor. If the Sixers are able to do the same, you'll be able to draw even in this series. And if Embiid is able to return healthy for game 3, I just say it right now, I think they'll win the game rather easily. And the reason why is because, one, Philly's going to feed off that crowd. Just watching a lot of games over the years at what they used to call Wells Fargo, now the Xfinity Center, they're going to feed off that crowd. And if they seek to play at a fast pace early and Cat gets into foul trouble, like Torrence said, which ain't hard to get him to get in foul trouble with him being over aggressive at times and committing a lot of silly fouls, then I would expect them to draw their first win of the series. And in game 4, continue to feed off of that same momentum. I don't think Philadelphia is out of the water just yet. And I was actually impressed that they were able to have a puncher's chance of winning a game without Embiid. And that is the one beauty about the first 2 games, like Torrence alluded to. You get a chance to figure out how you want to go about managing your rotations for this series. Because, like me and Torrence were talking about on our episode this week, Nick Nurse only played 6 guys against Boston. He was always going to have to play at least 7 or 8 if he wanted to have a chance in this Knicks series. I think he found something with Dominic Barlow. Maybe sticking with Edwards here and there for a couple of minutes when you need a perimeter defender. PG needs a blow. That could work. Andre Drummond had some stretches where he was solid. Of course, Embiid is going to struggle a little bit defensively because, like you said, Eamon, he's not as mobile as he once used to be. And we understand. But at the same time, he's the guy that when push comes to shove late in games, especially when it's close, they're going to need to dump it down to take the pressure off of Maxey, Edgecombe, and George having to create so much actions on the perimeter. And then they're going to need a big offensive game from Quentin Grimes, which I believe will come at home, a place where typically role players, they play much better at.
I think it's totally fair to have some level of belief about the Sixers. I just think ultimately the Knicks are a little bit more deep, even with the OG injury, and I don't know. I just have a hard time envisioning them not making it back to the conference finals, but surely stranger things have happened. I would like to see the Knicks. I know Mitchell Robinson was out last game, but I'd like to see them use that double big lineup a little bit more. I didn't think they leaned into it enough against Atlanta, but I think that could really give them headaches with or without Embiid. I think Mitchell Robinson and Cat really complement each other nicely, but I think that's a pretty easy button for Mike Brown to push, and then beyond that, I really have been impressed with what I've seen from Mikal Bridges. After a really slow start in the playoffs, these last 3 or 4 games, he's been really strong, and I think especially without OG or with OG not at 100%, his production is going to be huge, and I think he has everything in his power to do so. I I think he's a little underrated at this point. I know he gets made fun of a lot for the 6 first-round picks or whatever, but he's still a damn good player, and I think he can provide a lot of production for them. And then, yeah, Cat, he's got to stay out of foul trouble. I completely agree. I do think this series probably goes closer to 6, but I still feel confident that the Knicks can win. And Brunson has just been totally incredible, and I just don't see the Knicks having, or the Sixers rather, having a clear matchup for him. Maybe the OG injury opens it up and they just sort of send the house at him. But overall, I've been super impressed with what I've seen from him in this series, and I don't expect that to change.
But as great as Jalen Brunson is, one of Jalen Brunson's biggest miscues at certain times in the playoffs is when he likes to play hero ball and he gets away from the actions of involving others. We know Jalen Brunson can score with the best of them. You can book him for 25 to 30 a game each night this time of year. But getting guys like Cat involved, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, that's stuff that you can't get away from. And there's been some times, particularly in this playoffs, where we've seen the Knicks go into the fourth quarter with double-digit leads, only to watch them squander away because of Jalen Brunson getting away from the game plan and involving others. That's something that has to change. But to his credit, through the first 2 games, he has played well, and they're going to need him to keep that up. And most importantly, getting other guys involved. Because when he's doing that, on top of getting other guys involved, then they become unstoppable, in my opinion. I'm not going to say impossible to beat, but unstoppable.
I really like the point about Brunson hero ball, and I feel like that's been a big criticism of mine with the Knicks throughout the season, and then especially early in that Atlanta series, they go down 2-1. I felt like that was a huge issue. But for me personally, I haven't seen that be as much of a problem since the first few games of the Atlanta series. I feel like they've figured out ways to sort of just diversify their offense a lot, and that's really benefited them. They have to continue to do that with the OG injury looming, of course. But one thing I have noticed is they're really leaning into Cat as a playmaker, and I feel like that's worked really well. That's been a thing Mike Brown has talked about throughout the season. He wants to use him more in that like Sabonis role throughout the year. It's like, wait, he's not that similar to Sabonis. He's not that good of a passer or whatever. But he's really shown me a lot, especially in these playoffs, as a playmaker. And I feel like just having that extra versatility in their offense can be huge, and that's a reason why I do believe in this Knicks team. Maybe it's just believing too much into this like 6-game sample size or whatever since they went down against Atlanta, but I do feel like that was a huge turning point for them, and their offense has just looked so much better.
Well, yeah, I mean, one thing about the Knicks, offensively throughout the season, they always struck me as a group that was going to be among the top 5. And I was curious to see at the beginning of the year how Karl Anthony Towns would buy in to the way in which Mike Brown wanted to utilize him offensively. Like you said, in a Sabonis-like role, how he had him during his days as the coach with the Kings. I think it was some struggles early on, but over time, he's adapted, and in turn, the Knicks have been able to benefit from it. They've definitely performed very well since being down 2 games to 1 against Atlanta. They've been undefeated since. But now I think the real challenge remains, because one thing about the Knicks, at MSG, they feed off that crowd. But at home, on the road rather, they tend to struggle a little bit. And I want to see that those characteristics still remain, or do they seek to overcome that and grow and parlay their way into yet another Eastern Conference Finals?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree. And it will be big for them to take care of business on the road and at least steal one of those games and go up 3-1, of course. But yeah, I think we can move ahead to another series that's 2-0 right now, and that would be the Pistons taking a 2-0 lead over the Cavs. Right now, I do feel like a lot of people are kind of writing off the Cavs despite them being within striking distance of both these games. They really haven't looked good. But yeah, what are your guys' sort of major takeaways from this series, and do you feel like this heavily leans Pistons, or do you see a path for the Cavs to come back?
I can tell you as somebody that, like Torrence said, watch a lot of Pistons games. they on cloud nine right now. I think after getting through that early obstacle in the first round against Orlando, being down 3-1 and coming back, that they understand that they can't take these games for granted. And coming into this series, I knew that Detroit was the more physical team. And my question was for Cleveland was, how was Evan Mobley and Jared Allen going to find a way to match Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren on that end? And up to this point, they have not. And like Torrence said about Evan Mobley, 1 rebound, that's unacceptable. It's very unacceptable for a guy of his caliber who has all the potential and the talent in the world when he shows up to make this a very intriguing and interesting series. I understand that James Harden has turned the rock over far too many times. I understand that he struggled. But he also doesn't have the same burst that he once used to have. It's someone that's watched him for many years. And you can tell. And that matchup that he has with Asar Thompson, that's not going away. That just goes to show you what having youth and size in your favor could do to a guard that's over 35, trying to create separation, but is no longer able to do it the way that he once used to, or as easy as he used to. And then when you have Donovan Mitchell in the game, yeah, like when he's scoring at a high level, he's making an impact. But outside of that, you don't really feel that. And Detroit has an ability to weather storms by the way that they play and they stay connected with one another as a team. And for Cade Cunningham to come through the way he did in game 2, after what I thought was a very slow 3 quarters from him, like that just shows me that they just have all the confidence in the world right now. I said Pistons in 6 before the series, but I wouldn't be surprised if this series ended in 5 games with the way in which they're playing, because I think Detroit senses the moment. And I think a lot of people underestimated Detroit and didn't really know their background or their story whatsoever nationally. You know, because a lot of people were ready to write them off a week ago this time from which we recorded when they were down by 24 to Orlando, saying, well, the season's over. I think for the first time in a long time, fans across the country are going to have to get familiar with certain faces and certain teams being around for a little while longer than what they might have anticipated or expected. The Detroit Pistons and Cade Cunningham are the parties involved. And you're seeing why they were and are the top seed in the East at this time.
Yeah, it's been a super impressive start for Detroit. I want to start there before criticizing Cleveland a bit. But yeah, it's been super impressive. I'd like to give a shout out to Tobias Harris, honestly. I think it's been 7 straight games where he scored 20 plus points. He's really providing that second option level production that many people, including myself, were wondering that the Pistons had or didn't have. I feel like that's been the main flaw along with that 3-point shooting, but Tobias Harris has really silenced those concerns early, and then Cade Cunningham has just totally leveled up this entire season, but especially in the playoffs, he's been absolutely fantastic. Whenever there's 2 on the ball, he's making the right reads. He's getting to the rim at will, scoring at will against this Cavs defense, and they really don't have a clear matchup for him at all. I think he's really put himself into some high conversations, not just this postseason, but throughout the entire season. I feel like he's established himself as a borderline top 5 player in the league, and I mean, he was a borderline MVP candidate for a reason throughout the year, and he's been absolutely terrific, and in the clutch he's also just been amazing, not just in this series but in the Orlando series as well. So yeah, he's been amazing. I don't think the Cavs have a natural matchup for him. I think that's a big concern. When you look at that Magic team like you guys were talking about, it's a lot tougher based off their physicality. They didn't have totally the offensive weapons that the Cavs did, and I do feel like, where'd Torrance go? Hopefully he'll pop on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do feel like that is still one advantage for the Cavs, just their overall offensive personnel and their all-around arsenal there. We'll get to that later, but yeah, at the same time, Cade's just been absolutely terrific, and I mean, when you look at the Magic, they could double him a lot more. Everyone was more switchable. Franz Wagner, when he was healthy, was an incredibly tough matchup, and I do believe this isn't a shade at the Pistons or anything, but if Franz had stayed healthy, I think the Magic probably would have pulled it off. He was just doing so many things to make things difficult, and he provided that extra shot creation. But that's besides the point. I do think you guys are right to criticize Cleveland, especially for the lack of physicality, and the Evan Mobley stuff is really spot on. He's a super frustrating player because, I mean, last night's a perfect example. He had a tremendous defensive impact, really. He grabbed a bunch of blocks, he stole the ball a bunch of times, but he's not providing these essential big man duties. Especially as that rebounder, that big body down low. He's just not doing that, and they really have to play him with Allen, and sometimes they have to even go to Thomas Bryant because you just can't play him at the 5. But hey, he's 7 foot tall, and he's a great defender. He really has all the tools to be a great 5. But yeah, this playoffs and this series especially, it's put a microscope under him, and I'm disappointed as well. When you look at James Harden, that combination, I feel like it's kind of puzzling. Harden's struggled a lot in the playoffs. He isn't scoring. Like you said, Gabe, he just doesn't have that same burst, committing a lot of turnovers. But I am disappointed from Mobley's perspective that playing next to another playmaker in Harden hasn't elevated his game. We saw that with Garland as well. That never really helped him reach that next level offensively, and we're still waiting on that next jump. He's still just 23 years old, so I don't want to be too critical. I still think he has a bright future, but for this Cavs team, they need a lot more from Mobley, needless to say. I do think there are some positives to take away from this from Cleveland because it feels like everything went wrong for them in these past 2 games, and they still were within striking distance of winning both of them. And I do think that can be used as a positive of sorts, but yeah, it's definitely alarming. I personally still wouldn't write them off just because of the all-around shooting that they have, and they shot below 30% last game. I do think that gives them a path to winning, especially with the Pistons' lack of shooting. They had a terrific shooting night. I think they shot above 40% last night, but that's typically not their bread and butter. So if the Cavs shooters and role players can get going, I do think that provides a path. But they're absolutely going to need more from Mobley and Harden. And then on the bright side, I would say Jared Allen has really impressed me these past 2 games. And even dating back to the Orlando series, I think he was really terrific. So the fact that Allen does have some level of success paired with the shooting advantage that the Cavs have, I don't think you can completely write them off. And then the other thing is Duran still hasn't really had a great series at all, especially game 2, he struggled. So I do think there is some path for Cleveland to win, but really alarming start to the series. And then on the flip side, super impressive start from the Pistons.
I
Yeah,
just
I
don't.
mean,
Oh,
the thing the thing about it is, like, for me with Detroit right now, Dennis Jenkins over the last few games has picked it up. He had a slow start to the playoffs, but I think with his performance in game 7, you can see his confidence has elevated. And if Dennis Jenkins is able to score in double figures consistently off the bench for this Pistons club, and Duncan Robinson is able to continue to be a two-way threat with his ability to play the passing lanes starting to show and shine through alongside of hitting timely threes. Because last night, I think that's what he did exceptionally well. Like, it was a stretch where the Cavs, if they didn't tie the game, they were at least down 2. And Duncan got a shot on the wing from 3 and knocked it down. And those are what I call momentum killers or rally killers. Like, those are the shots that really break your back this time of year when you're fighting to get back in a game in which you're down double digits. And then all of a sudden you get these timely threes from role players. Not that you would necessarily least expect, but at times where you can't afford them because you're trying to really finish the job off, to which the Cavs weren't able to do. I won't count Cleveland out completely, but Evan Mobley, he has to be better, and he has to take this personally too. And I'm gonna tell you why. He was the 3rd overall pick in the same draft class as Cade Cunningham, and you're being outplayed by your draft classmate right now. And that's not the first guy that Cade Cunningham is outplayed in his draft class. No disrespect to Jalen Suggs, because they're 2 different stratospheres and tiers in the league. But I remember a time when people in America were debating about who do you go with number 1 5 years ago. Is it Cade Cunningham or is it Jalen Suggs?
look, I don't have any faith in the Cavs. I'll say it again. I don't want to play, the games. Oh, well, if they no, it's a personality thing. That's why they're gonna lose this series. They've already folded in so many ways. You don't bet on a team with the guy getting 1 rebound in the front court. I don't care how many blocks or steals he gets. That's not somebody that's going to have a mentality change within a week. The Pistons can smell fear on the Cleveland Cavaliers. You mentioned Jalen Duran hasn't really gotten started. I would probably say, yeah, from a points perspective. But if Tobias Harris, Mr. 18 points per game, is going to continue to keep getting over 20, the trickle-down effect just opens up. If Tobias Harris is scoring at that level, Duncan Robinson can stay on the court a little bit longer because we don't have to lean so much on defense because defense is keeping up pace. As you mentioned, Dennis Jenkins is starting to knock down shots as well. Cade Cunningham has been seeking James Harden out anytime he's in need of a bucket, and Harden hasn't been putting up any resistance to that. There's no reason to expect the Cavs to win more than one game at this point, and I expect that game to be a game where they're shooting lights out from the floor. They beat the Pistons early, and okay, yeah, they won, but their hearts they're not in it. That's just my personal opinion. I don't want to play mind reader, but this Cavs team, I think they're just physically beat and mentally early.
Yeah, I definitely think that's valid, and I can totally understand how you come to that conclusion. Especially, you look at the last series against the Raptors, like, there was no reason for the Cavs to go 7 with them. And frankly, I felt like they were out toughed in that series, but they were able to out talent the Raptors at the end of the day. With this Pistons team, you don't have that same talent deficit. Where the Cavs, they were just clearly more talented than the Raptors, especially with injuries to Brandon Ingram and Emmanuel Quickly by Game 7. That just gave them the edge. But against the Pistons, you just can't out talent a 60-win team, and I feel like that's the tough reality that they're facing. At the same time, yeah, I personally can't give them up. I still do have concerns about just how sustainable this secondary creation from Tobias Harris is, even though he's been tremendous and he deserves all the credit in the world for that. And then the three-point shooting, I feel like, could still be an advantage for the Cavs. But, man, these past 2 games from the Cavs and the Raptors series earlier, it's looked really rough, and I can totally understand writing them off.
Hey, Donovan Mitchell said it best last year when they got knocked out in 5 games to the Pacers. We could go 82-0, but it's about what we do in the playoffs that matters in the eyes of most people across the country. And this is why we are where we are when it comes to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and we wonder whether or not they can overcome a 2-0 series deficit for what now? The 3rd year in a row that they've been on this stage. Well, I know they tied. They won game 2 against Boston a couple years ago, but even that series ended in 5 games. Like this has been the round for them that has been their kryptonite. The only thing that I could even give them a positive outlook on is the series shifts to Cleveland is they're undefeated at home in the playoffs. But like you said, Eamon, they're playing against a team in Detroit who they can't get away with the sins that they did with Toronto. So something's got to give at this point. And they're going to have to dig deep and down to figure out what that is in order to turn this series around in their favor.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, like you said, Gabe, this is now a 4-year sample size because you even go back to the series in 2023 against the Knicks. They got bounced in 5 games in the first round.
Yeah.
This core is going to need some serious shakeups in the offseason. I think if they don't get past the second round, Donovan Mitchell's probably out of there. I think they could be a stealth Giannis team with like a Mobley for Giannis swap. But yeah, I think they're bound for a summer of change if they don't potentially pull off this comeback. But who knows?
Let me
You
tell
don't
you
like the
something.
Giannis for Mobley swap?
No, I'll get to that in a second. But let me tell you something. Donovan Mitchell, he's not 1 foot out the door. He got both of his heels
Yeah.
on the steps. He's already, he keeps announcing it after each game this series. Like, hey, at the end of the day, there's life and then there's basketball. Hey, nah, man. But the Giannis not going to Cleveland. Giannis not. He's
I
not
can't see
going to
that either.
Cleveland. He knows that team doesn't have heart. See, like the guys in the league, they know better. They know better. That's why you hear certain teams are like, no, we want this team in the postseason. Jaden McDaniels with his assessment of who the Denver Nuggets are, right? Those are unspoken things in the league. Guys feel like Cleveland can be pushed around. And it's been proven to be true over the last 4 years. We know James Harden's history in the postseason. Usually it's between game 6 and 7, but he's gotten an early start on that as well during the first 2 games of this series. It, it is what it is, man. You know, Cleveland headed towards another rebuild, honestly, because you're looking at having to probably move James Harden if he doesn't get the contract he's looking for on the back nine of his career. And Donovan Mitchell, for in his mind, he believes that he deserves to be a part of a contender. I don't know where he gets that from, that he deserves such a thing, like he merits being able to force his way out. But that's where he's at right now. And you got teams like Detroit, Charlotte coming up. Pacers will be back with Halliburton next season. It's time. It's time to let the Cleveland Cavaliers bandwagon go. Hell, LeBron even said during the whole Memphis thing, he doesn't like going back home. So Cavs fans can let that dream go as well.
Yeah, no, I think the reason I brought up the idea of trading for Giannis isn't because I think they're the most likely Giannis suitor by any means. It was just the only world I see Mitchell staying. If they do lose this second round series and it's another disappointing playoff run, is if they make a big move, and I think they have been linked to Giannis a lot, so it would have to be like that. But I don't consider it probable in any way.
Well, whatever they do, if they want to retain Donovan Mitchell, they're gonna have to go after another all-star talent. But like Torrence was saying, if he's showing you signs that he's out the door based off of the remarks he's made, not only in this playoff run, but in recent past, like the writing's on the wall. And the thing that makes this tough, I think, from the Cleveland perspective, is they have the highest payroll in the league, bar none. And they're paying a lot of guys over there. And at some point, if this stuff ain't working, you're going to have to retool and readjust this roster and figure something out. But even if you do, does it really net you a championship in the end, or a team on paper at least that's good enough for you to say, yeah, I have faith in them? I don't think it does.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great point, both about the payroll and then just Mitchell in general. We go back to 2022 when he first arrived in Cleveland. That wasn't one of his preferred destinations. It was a massive shock to everyone that he even got traded to Cleveland. It just totally came out of nowhere. So the writing has been on the wall. And then you look at the payroll; it's really rough. I think it's also rough if they hope to enter a rebuild. They don't have many of their picks because they gave it up mostly for Mitchell. So I don't really know how they retool from here, and I feel like it could be just sort of making another like all-in kind of push with Harden. I think Harden might want to stay there because it's kind of hard to find another destination for him after he requested a trade to Cleveland. But who knows? I definitely think if their current trajectory continues, it's going to be probably definitely one of the most interesting teams to watch this offseason. But yeah, I think we can move on to our last series here, and that's the Thunder and Lakers. Thunder up 2. Lakers played 2 pretty solid games in my opinion, but yeah, the Thunder are clearly on a different level. I don't have a ton of takeaways with this, but yeah, anything of note with this series for you guys?
One team is younger and quicker and more athletic than the other team. And that's really all there is to it. That's all there is to it. And LeBron is still LeBron, but when you have nights like they did last night, that's a deflating feeling because they shot the ball well. Rui Hachimura gave them a great performance that they needed, but yet you still get beat by double digits. And I know I said Thunder in 5 coming into the series. And a part of me really wants to stick with that pick, right? I really do. But when you see games like last night, it's hard to do that. And they're doing this without Jalen Williams on the floor, by the way. You know, you got Jared McCain stepping up to the plate, put up double figures in both games. If that's a trend that continues with the way in which SGA and Chet and all those other guys over there on the supporting cast are playing, this could be another sweep on the horizon for the Oklahoma City Thunder, as they would have then gone and advanced to back-to-back Western Conference Finals.
Said at the top this was going to be a sweep. Just too much
No, I
talent
know.
for the Lakers to overcome, too much size for the Lakers to overcome, too much athleticism. And we're seeing it just through the first two games. With the Thunder, you never know who's going to be the guy to step up that night. Now, Jared McCain, AJ Mitchell, they've come along. SGA still hasn't gotten to 30 points. We know that's an automatic for him most nights. The Lakers are doing a great job defensively on him, but at some point he's going to break through and get back to the usual. The only takeaways from the Lakers, LeBron still LeBron. For all of the fans who wanted LeBron to take a back seat to Austin Reeves and Luka Doncic, I think you all should kind of see what's important and what's valuable. Durability, being able to be adaptable to the changes round to round. Austin Reeves tends to struggle against athletic defensive teams. He broke through a bit in game 2, but I don't see any consistency coming at all. And Luka Doncic, you know, being out with an injury in the postseason, no player wants that. You're not in control of that, but at the same time, that there has to be a value in that. LeBron, as I mentioned on our show, when they won the title in the bubble, one of the first things he said is, "Hey, I've never missed a postseason game." And that made me think about, Anthony Edwards and his return to game 1. This is the time of the year where you got to play through injuries, play through physicality, and the Lakers have succumbed to that. They only have but so much talent on their roster. I mean, they're giving Jake LaRavia minutes that he doesn't want. He's been by far the worst player in the postseason. Seriously, he's been terrible. And for the Thunder, Chet Holmgren, leading scorer in both games. A guy who I've always said, when Chet's scoring the ball for the Thunder, they're unbeatable. And, hey, he sees DeAndre Ayton and Rui down there. He's taking full advantage of it on both ends of the floor. So I expect the sweep, plain and simple.
Yeah, I totally agree. I thought this was going to be a sweep heading into it, and I still feel that way. Maybe the Lakers can steal a game. Frankly, unless Luka returns, if they're able to steal just a game against this Thunder team while they're undermanned, I feel like that's somewhat of an accomplishment, to be honest, just because the Thunder are that good. But yeah, like you guys said, just an extreme talent and athleticism disadvantage for the Lakers. Props to LeBron for continuing to be great at his advanced age. It's truly remarkable to see. And yeah, he just reads the game at such a high level still, and he's still able to have those moments of just unreal play as we saw last series as well. So yeah, LeBron's been great. I think the Lakers defense has been sneaky pretty good on Shea. They've been forcing him into some difficult reads, limiting him as a scorer a little bit. He had a lot of uncharacteristic turnovers in game 1, and I think the Lakers team defense and JJ Redick's coaching deserve some praise there. But yeah, ultimately, the Thunder are just kind of going to run away with this one. The two games have been closer than expected, so maybe that does give some hope that the Lakers can steal a game, but I feel like that's the ceiling. And yeah, like you guys said, it's pretty crazy to see that the Thunder are this good while Jalen Williams is injured. Just totally impressive, and yeah, they have to be the clear favorites at this point. As pretty much everyone has said throughout the year, they're just so dominant, and we could be truly seeing one of the most dominant playoff runs in league history.
And they have the mental
Yeah, but
advantage.
Yeah,
They have
definitely,
the they have the
definitely, and
mental advantage against. Yeah,
having
go
won
ahead.
one. Yeah. No, I got you.
No, they have the mental advantage night to night. I mean, you got teams coming in knowing that they're going to be physical. The Thunder are going to be physical. Lou Dort's going to be physical. Hardenstein, the guys in the paint, the guys off the bench, guys are going to come into the game physical in the paint on the perimeter. But the other team doesn't feel like they're getting the calls on the other end of the floor. And once you got the refs in your head, you playing too many games. You can't play basketball and consistently have debates throughout the game. I mean, to the point that the entire team surrounded the referees to have a conversation about the officiator. I've never seen that one. The entire team. I'm used to LeBron wanting to have his chit chats after every quarter with the team, and we know what Luka does when he plays. But at that point, you're mentally beat. You know, you're mentally beat because you at that point you're like, man, we already are up against a tall task on the court against this team, and now you guys aren't giving us a fair shake. It feels. Hey, this is the same team. You got to
Yeah,
remember something about this Thunder team too. They're the same team that beat the Lakers on the night Bron broke the scoring record in LA. They have a thing about embarrassing the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't even think they've like for real been serious this whole series. They've seemed very relaxed and nonchalant throughout this series. Personally, to me,
and you bring up a great point, Torrence, when you talk about the mental battle, right? Because that's something that I don't think a lot of teams around the league have been successful at battling when going up against this group, and you got to know how to do it. You even could go back to the previous round against Phoenix with Devin Booker after game 2 making his post-game remarks about it. Like every series, the officiating with Oklahoma City comes up. But yet you know how these games are going to be officiated. You understand as a player that it's going to be a level of physicality that have to be brought to the game. And if you're not going to match that from the opening tip to the sound of the final buzzer with Oklahoma City, then most of the time you're going to end up on the losing side of the battle. So hopefully teams that are left still standing that may have to go up against Oklahoma City in the conference final round or the NBA finals should they advance there for the second year in a row, take this message to heart and realize, hey, we can't get caught up in the theatrics of the game and the complaining. We just got to settle it on the hardwood against these guys.
Yeah, I mean the officiating is always seemingly a big discussion with this Thunder team. I'm not the biggest guy in terms of officiating conversations. It's kind of exhausting. I thought last night's game was pretty horribly officiated, and it was just kind of rough to watch. Just how long it went on. But I mean, there was bad calls on both sides, and hey, Reeves got a lot of free throws. I thought it was kind of funny that he went up to the refs after the game, and the whole team, to you guys' point, also followed him. But yeah, it was kind of strange. I don't know. I mean, I think like the big play that was controversial was like Shea getting the flagrant one call. I was like, they kind of got tangled up. I didn't think it was like a dirty play. Lou Dort, I think, has had some dirty plays in the past, but I mean, hey, you got to be ready for it against this Thunder team. And honestly, in the past year and a half worth of playoff runs that we've seen from them. The only team that has sort of overcome that hurdle, in my opinion, has been the Pacers, who, of course, forced them to 7 games. I guess you could say the Nuggets as well, but it is rare, and I do think it requires some level of experience. So we'll see if the Spurs, if they emerge, can do it. The Timberwolves, if they can do it. The Timberwolves, they often struggle with sort of the officiating aspect, and they can sort of be pulled out of games because of that as a result. And then whoever comes out of the East, if they do play the Thunder and the Thunder come out of the West, whatever, they'll have to be ready for it. So I think that's an important thing to know because I think it's mentally exhausting to go against a team with this level of physicality, and then some of the calls they do get on the other end of the floor as well. Unless we have any closing thoughts on this series, I think we can move ahead to talking about a few more items around the league, including your Chicago Bulls, and as they enter the lottery this weekend. So yeah, new front office obviously with Bryson Graham coming in. I guess initial impressions of Graham, and then if they jump up into the top three, is there any prospects that you're especially eyeing, or if they stay at 9, is the strategy more to fill a specific positional void or just best player available?
The
It's
Bulls
got to
have
be best player available. No, go ahead. Go ahead to it.
no. I mean, best player available, plain and simple. And I believe that if they're not within that top 5, that they should be looking to trade that pick for the best player available. There may be some teams that have some guys near restricted free agency, second and third year guys who you may want to take a chance on in the trade if you end up, let's say, around 7 and below. I think right now the Bulls need to try to get as much blue chip talent in the building as possible. You drafting between 6 and 9 every year is very dangerous. You saw how that worked out for the Orlando Magic previous to getting Paolo in the building. You've seen how that worked out for the Brooklyn Nets. If you don't get one of those elite guys, don't be afraid to move the pick, especially now that we have someone in the building who's clearly used the word rebuild. That's a word that's been avoided by the Chicago Bulls organization for a very long time.
I'm of the mindset of Torrance when it comes to this. You have to get the best player available, no matter where you're selected in the draft. Of course, people in our neck of the woods would love to see a top 5 pick or a top 3 pick. But there's so much talent in this draft class that during March Madness, as I was watching the tournament, damn near every guy was saying, hey, the Bulls could use him, regardless of position. And I'm glad that Bryson Graham said that this is a rebuild. Because that's something, like Torrance said, you have not heard the Bulls' brain trust or ownership group use in a number of years. It's been a very long time. I have guys such as Darius Acuff that I would love to see in a Bulls uniform. Darren Peterson is another guy. AJ DiBonza. But like you say, it all depends on where they fall. But if they are within that 7 through 12 range, I'm looking closely at a guy like LeBaron Filan out of Alabama, who kind of reminds me a lot of Tyrese Maxey. I'm looking at Kingston Flemings. I'm even considering Yaxel Lindeborg, a do-it-all Swiss Army knife forward out of Michigan who encompasses a lot of skills that the Bulls have sorely lacked over the years. And at least my lifetime as a fan, with athletic forward that could lead the break, can shoot the wide open shot from 3-point land, and then defend multiple positions. And is very strong. And even though he's an older prospect, I think he could come in right away and contribute and make a difference. A lot of Bulls rookies over the last couple of years haven't been able to do that, where you feel their impact on a night-by-night basis. No disrespect to Modest Buzelis, but as great as Modest Buzelis has been in stretches, there are times where he leaves a lot of people yearning for more consistency. Or you could also start to see times and stretches where it's like, hey, he need to get in the weight room a little bit more. So I feel like you have to take best player available, regardless of position. And you have to leave no stone unturned if you're the Chicago Bulls front office and Bryson Graham as well. Like, if it's an opportunity that you have to move up in the draft, I say you go do that. If you have an opportunity to get a top 10 pick, and it's a team that says, hey, we can probably give you an all-star wing player if you give us that pick, you have to consider that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Bulls have really turned over the right page with Graham. All the press conferences and stuff seem great. I'm glad that he's committed to a rebuild for your guys' sake. And yeah, I think from what I've heard, he's going to put a big emphasis on defense and length, and that makes sense given his background with the Hawks. And yeah, I definitely agree. You got to go best player available in this class. That's most likely going to be a guard if you do stay. But yeah, if you jump, you really can't go wrong with any of these top 4 prospects, honestly. And then the other big pieces, you also have a pick at 15. So like you said, Gabe, that could be used to potentially trade up or just get into lottery level talents. I think could be huge for their rebuild. So yeah, I think you really can't go wrong with any of these guys. I'm interested to see, especially with that defensive mindset. how that plays out with these guards because you look at a guy like Kinston Flemings or Braden Burries and they're a little bit more defensive minded, whereas Darius Acuff, while he's a super gifted offensive player, the defensive limitations are real. So I'm curious if they're put in that position to choose between like a Flemings or an Acuff, what direction they'll go. But ultimately, just excited for the Bulls to really be turning over that right page, and I think the future is bright. And yeah, I look at Mattis as the only real untouchable piece of this team. I think potentially even we could see Giddey get moved with that new identity, but who knows? I think the Bulls are trending in the right direction.
Well, this the thing about Modest, and me and Torrence have had this conversation amongst ourselves a couple of times privately. If you offer me a top 10 pick for Modest, I would consider taking that top 10 pick. I'm not necessarily married to him being an untouchable player, and I think the fact that you have a new man leading the front office leaves Modest needing to prove himself, or he should at least be looking over his shoulder, because that means you not safe. I wouldn't look at anybody on this roster as truly safe. And Josh Giddey, I mean, yeah, we like the fact that he puts up numbers, but have those numbers translated to winning games. And I think that's been one of the biggest issues over his first couple of years in the Windy City with the Bulls. So I'm intrigued, but I'm cautiously optimistic. And they got to just get some talent in the building. Like Darius Acuff, I know he has his defensive struggles, but from a point guard standpoint, the talent pops off the screen. And coming up, we saw Derrick Rose, John Calipari. He was, Darius Acuff was coached by John Calipari at Arkansas. Midwest guy, tough and as rugged as they come. Like the Bulls need somebody like that on their roster.
Yeah, Buzella's being untouchable. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. If I'm Graham, I'm walking in first day in the office. I'm looking at the board with the roster, and I'm calling to try to get a trade for everybody. I'm going to assess everyone's market value because we've had this conversation. You're a Celtics fan. Do you see Giddey starting on your team? Do you see Buzella starting on the current Boston Celtics?
Ultimately, I'm not a huge Giddy guy. I think the one time we did see him in the playoffs, it didn't translate super well. I would personally consider trading him, but Buzelis is a guy that I'm higher on. I think he has that jack of all trades sort of skill set, and he has a lot of size at that win position. So I am a little bit higher on Buzelis, but I can understand the mentality that nobody's untouchable for the right price. But I do think he has all-star level upside. I think he could be like a Franz or Denny type of player. I'm not saying you build your franchise around him, but I think he's a nice, sustainable building block for the Bulls. But I totally understand the other perspective.
And that's exactly why him and pick number 15 would be advertised as for sale with this rebuild that we're looking towards right now. Because, yes, he has that potential. He's statistically very interesting with the three-point shooting along with the shot blocks, the athletic ability as well. But ultimately, I feel like he's a non-consequential player. I don't believe that we'll be hurt in the long run if we ever traded him. Same with Josh Giddey, of course. Me personally, I'll say it here. I know we're talking about the draft, but I've said to Gabe, the Bulls have all of that cap space this offseason. I'm going to go get the guy with the biggest name during free agency. This year it's looking like Austin Rivers. If I can get a guy like Austin Rivers in, I'm trading Josh Giddey.
Austin Reeves, yeah.
Austin Reeves, I'm sorry. I said Austin Rivers. Jesus.
Yeah,
Austin
I got
Reeves in. Yeah, I'm trying to get Austin Reeves in the door. Let him rock for about 2 years. We trade Giddey, get what we can from him, and in 2 years, we trade Austin Reeves and see what we can get. And hopefully by that time, some of our young guys have developed to the point that they can take over. I don't see this Bulls thing being fixed in 2-3 years. I think we look up 4 years from now, and then we're looking at a playoff team. There's a lot of trust that needs to be rebuilt with this organization from players in the league as well. I don't see a lot of superstars clamoring to come to Chicago based on what the organization has been for the last 20 to 30 years, honestly.
Yeah, I mean we know that firsthand, Torrance. Just living here our whole life, if not most our life, and seeing guys come through. Like people love to play here. Guys in the league even come kick it here, train here over the summer, playing the pro am and stuff like that. But when it comes to the relationship between the Bulls and players around the league, it's not favorable. It's not favorable at all, and it's been unfortunate, especially when you consider the brand identity from the 90s up and how many fans this organization has. It's the most recognizable brand in all the NBA, if not the most recognizable brand. That's saying a lot considering the history of the Lakers and the Celtics among other squads. But yeah, I get not being married to Buzelis, and it's funny you say he's like Franz Wagner to you, Eamon, because that was my comparison to him coming out of the draft. I'm like, he reminds me of him, but I'm like, I don't know if that's a true needle mover. I could definitely see him being on the next Bulls winning team, but if he was, I don't see him being the guy that's leading the marquee.
Third or fourth option
Yeah,
in the
no,
best scenario.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't think second option? I don't know. I think he could be like a
Mm-mm.
kind of like a Franz, like a second option
And
high. I don't know. Maybe I mean you guys would know better than me. You guys have watched more Bulls than me, so
but see, here's the thing: you're talking to someone who doesn't believe Franz should be the second option for the Magic either. That guy that gets you
that's valid. Then
the guy
I
that
think
gets you
it's
that near triple double average, that 15, 17 with the 7 and 7, that type of guy, he's a fill in the blanks type of guy. Ideally, in most situations, you saw the Golden State Warriors. To me, people are quick to go, Steph, Clay, Draymond during those years, but I was always of the belief it was Steph, Draymond, and Andre Iguodala as the most important guys in that early run. So if you can move a guy like Buzelis and Franz to that third spot, I think that's when you're talking about a championship level team. And with the Bulls, that's what I'm looking forward to. I don't want, you know, just to make the playoffs and be the Miami Heat. I want to be in title contention year after year. And when guys are looking to sign with the Bulls, they come in with that expectation. That's what Bryson Graham said. He walked in the door and he felt it. You see those six banners. You see the Jordan statue. You see the Pippen bust. You see Derrick Rose's jersey in the rafters. There's a standard here.
Here that I don't think some Bulls fans are looking at enough. And he may not be the guy that wows you or anything like that, but we saw what he was able to do when he was a primary option when Philadelphia was in lottery contention last year. That's Quentin Grimes. I've always liked Quentin Grimes' game. And if they're unable to get a guy like Brayden Burries in the draft, why not get the guy that I would think is his player comp? So that could be a nice alternative option as well.
I like the Grimes pick a lot. Yeah, I think that could be a really nice move for you guys. Just get some really extra everything in my opinion. Grimes provides so much versatility, but he can really be that high level scorer as we saw. So I think that's a great realistic target for the Bulls, and he fits the timeline fairly well as well. But yeah, I think we can move ahead to some quick questions from the audience. First, starting over at Instagram, a question from my guy Roundball Renaissance. He wants to know biggest playoff dropper so far.
Hmm.
Dropper, as in like
I'm gonna
a
let you
dip in
go
their
first.
production.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, like
I have
right.
a feeling who you're gonna say.
Oh nah, see that guy. If you're talking about Evan Mobley, that's to be expected. That's to be expected. Honestly, the guy that first popped into my head, funny enough, didn't have that many expectations coming into the postseason, but created expectations. Funny enough, is Luke Kennard. He got a little buzz at the beginning of that Rocket series. Maybe looked like okay, Mike could help the Lakers out. Mike could help himself out during the offseason. And then right after, he hasn't had a great game since about game 2 of that Rocket series. If you want to just go based on just this postseason.
Think of I'm really trying to think of a guy outside of Cleveland. because the Cleveland guys are very noticeable.
You could say Jalen Duran,
These playoffs.
obviously, from statistics standpoint. I mean, he did let
Yeah,
Wendell
yeah,
Carter
definitely.
kind of
Yeah,
outplay him the last round.
yeah, you could, but see the thing with Durant, like he's still making his presence felt on the glass, and that was one of the names that I did think about. It for me, yeah, it would have to be Jalen Durant because that was a guy that was performing at an All NBA level when you think about it, and was a guy that was in the running for Most Improved Player, and he's only had I think one double double to show for his 8 playoff games thus far, 9 as we're recording this. So yeah, Jalen Duren is definitely up there, and this is a guy that's playing for a new contract, by the way, as well. So unless if he reverses to the mean that we become accustomed to, then yeah, like if we going off of like true numbers and stock evaluations, yeah, Jalen Duren is took a dip.
Yeah, Dern was my first thought as well. He's still a solid, productive player. I don't think he's been a net negative in any way, but going from a solid, productive player, kind of like what we saw from him last year, compared to what he was in the regular season, where I think he should be on an All NBA team. That's a big difference. I'll go with Brandon Ingram. I know he's out of the playoffs, so maybe Groundball wanted someone who's still in the playoffs. But in terms of just raw productional dip, I feel like Brandon Ingram has got to be towards the top of that list, if not at the top. He averaged 12 points a game in the 5 playoff games he played in, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and he shot the ball really inefficiently. So yeah, I mean, this is the second. He had a really good playoff series like 4 or 5 years ago against the Suns when the Pelicans were an 8 seed, but against the Thunder and now against the Cavs, he's had 2 really rough back-to-back playoff series, and I do think it's fair to question how much his scoring profile translates. And I also think part of it's just like him being forced into this number 1 option role when he's more of a secondary star, in my opinion. So yeah, I'd have to go with Brandon Ingram on that one, unfortunately. Next, we can move on to a question from my guy Ryan Druin. He wants to know, do you think we're going to start seeing stars intentionally request trades to teams in the Eastern Conference with the conference imbalance? And he specifically mentioned the possibility of Kevin Durant getting traded again and preferring this time to go to the East Coast specifically.
I'll go first
I
on
don't
this
think
one.
Kevin Durant, if he wanted to get, all right, go ahead.
Kevin Durant's not moving anywhere anytime soon. He'll be on the Houston Rockets next season. That'll be year 20 for him. And I think at that point, he'll evaluate where his career is going. But I don't see the argument that the East is just weaker than the West anymore. I know people, you see Oklahoma City and San Antonio at the top of the Western Conference. And when you look at youth and having star players, but as we've said, you got the Pacers with the lottery pick and Tyrese Halliburton coming back into the fold. You have the Knicks looking like they could potentially make the NBA Finals. And if they don't, they have enough on their roster to go get a guy like Giannis if they decide they need to make another move. You mentioned the Celtics having the best duo in the league and Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Yeah, I don't see the guys just wanting to be in the East. And here's the other thing. What star players are we talking about potentially moving? Because I don't see many guys that are true needle movers in the league right now. I don't believe that if a team gets Giannis, they're automatically a title contender. I don't believe the same if Devin Booker was to move, he makes a team a title contender. Right now, with the parity in the league, it's more so about who's the team that can have 1 or 2 star players at the top of their roster, have depth, and have a team that can play offense and defense at a high level.
Yeah, like I don't see Kevin Durant going anywhere either, especially knowing that he's in a state that he happened to not only go to college in, but if you follow him on Twitter, you know he speaks very well about. Um, the East isn't as bad as people think it is. It's just not anymore. And even though the West is more top heavy, compared to years past. I mean, I throw around the trade that I've heard speculated on a lot. Devin Booker to Detroit. We understand the connections that reside there, right? Let's just say the Pistons fall short of reaching the finals and they made that a reality. It would be a nice trade to see, but then again, I don't see Devin Booker necessarily requesting a trade to be out of Phoenix either. Especially when Matt Ishbia has let it be known that they intend to make him a clear priority in everything they do, trying to build a winner around him. And oh, on top of that, he's the all-time leading scorer in the history of the franchise, and he's been with that franchise through good and bad, and continues to remain loyal to it. So I don't see too many guys moving or wanting to move, especially when they're getting paid top dollar. And if they do move, you might go from being the leading man to now you the number 2 or 3 man, depending on what roster you're moving to, and you don't have the same sway or power to dictate things the way that you would at the current organization in which you play for. So I don't really see too many guys just demanding trades at this point. Not in this era or decade of basketball where, hell, you could be one injury away from getting to the conference finals. You could be one move away from getting to the NBA finals. And this has been an era of parity in a lot of ways that hasn't been seen in the history of the NBA since the 70s. And I know Torrence would say the NBA started in the 80s, but that's why this has been such a unique era to kind of process in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, this era of parity, I don't think you can sort of make super teams and stuff like that. And I don't think just because you're trading for a star means you're an automatic contender. But I do think we could see some player movement this offseason. I think Giannis would obviously be the big one. And I do think, to Ryan's point, there have been reports coming out from the likes of Jake Fisher and Mark Stein that Giannis prefers to stay in the East. And part of that could be proximity to Greece, but another part of that I think is just an easier path to the title. I do still
Mm-hmm.
think there is some level of imbalance. I don't think it's as bad as maybe 10 years ago, for instance, but in terms of the top end contenders, I would say they're in the West. West might be slightly less deep, but I mean, when you look at Oklahoma and San Antonio, these two teams are already the two best in the league, and they're only going to be able to sustain that success for the next decade plus. So I do think that is something players might consider. Maybe like a Donovan Mitchell, he might want to stay in the East if he does request out of Cleveland, for instance. Durant, I don't know if he's going to pull the back-to-back trade request, but you never know with Durant. And yeah, I think you'd probably want to stay in the East. If LeBron leaves, I know you guys said he's probably not going to go back to Cleveland. I might not rule that one out. So yeah, I do think that's something that players could be thinking about. But the other thing is like these front offices might say, all right, Giannis, cool, you want to stay in the East? We're going to trade you to Golden State. That's the best package. So I do think players might have that preference, but at the end of the day, the organization might decide to ship them out west, and there's nothing they can do about it. So I think it's an interesting point. I do think it's something that players are still considering personally, though. Next question is from my guy, Bruce Velez. He wants to know who's been the most surprising Timberwolves player of this playoff run.
Ooh. For me, I'm gonna go with the hometown guy, Terrence Shannon Jr. Terrence Shannon Jr. was somebody that had never had a start in his career to date, and to Game 6, and all he does is go out there and put up double figures, and then he follows it up with a series opener against San Antonio where he gets his stuff swatted several times by Victor Wembanyama, but in true Chicago fashion, he doesn't back down. He continues attacking and going to the rim, and I've been impressed because I can tell just watching Terrence and having followed him extensively when he was at the high school level that he's still learning variations of the pro game, such as how to take charges. And I know that that frustrates Chris Finch a lot, and sometimes it's moments where he wants to bench him. But because Dante DiVincenzo is down and Io's been out in what 2 out of the last 3 games, they haven't been able to do that, and he's been able to play through his mistakes. And I think as a process, he's learning a lot from it, and he's shooting the ball with confidence. Well, something that's always been a work in progress for him. But to me, that's been the guy.
Vader McDaniels, you know, from the standpoint of how he closed out that game 6 against what was that, 6 or 7? The game against the Nuggets, the
Yeah,
scoring,
game 6. Yeah.
game 6, the scoring. That was most impressive. Usually he's looked at as the point of attack defender on his team. He can get a few buckets, but for him to make those shots down the stretch in that fourth quarter, it took the Wolves to another ceiling because now you have somebody on the perimeter next to Ant who can legit go get you 20 plus points per game. On top of the fact you got Julius Randle, you have Io, you got Terrence Shannon stepping up. Now you're looking at this Timberwolves offense and you're like, man, you can really attack teams from a lot of different angles and keep Anthony Edwards from being double teamed throughout the games.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are two great picks. Personally, I'm gonna double down on Gabe's Terrence Shannon pick. I think McDaniel's for me. He's been a player that I've been a long time believer in, and we saw the offensive growth throughout the season. I wrote countless articles. I probably wrote 20 articles about them needing to empower him more in the offensive. We've been seeing that a lot in the playoffs. So I guess him being empowered has surprised me a little bit, but I personally am not surprised by him reaching this level. But it's absolutely been a big difference maker. And yeah, with Terrence for me, or TJ, whatever you want to call him, I think he's been really terrific in these playoffs, and being able to step in and provide that production without Dante has been massive for this team. And that game 6 performance was totally insane and something I didn't expect. Throughout the season, it was really a rocky season for him. He had that foot injury. Didn't produce at all throughout the first half of the season. With the IO addition as well as Kyle Anderson, he lost his spot in the rotation. And then at the end of the season, they had some injuries, and he got some run again, and then he showed his upside. And then being able to carry that into the playoffs and just totally go nuclear in a series clinching performance did surprise me a lot. And it's been awesome to watch. The way he attacks the basket so fearlessly is incredible, and he adds a lot to this Timberwolves team. But yeah, moving on to our last question over on Twitter from my guy Chris Lambert. He wants to know who the next Pelicans coach should be.
This is a situation that's close to me because I have some family in New Orleans. I would say they need to go against the grain, and this isn't really against the grain to me, but maybe in some NBA circles it might be. I wouldn't mind seeing Rajon Rondo down there. He's a Louisville, Kentucky guy. I think he knows the culture of the city, having played there and been a part of one of their more last solid teams several years back. I would like to see him get that opportunity. Young coach. I can only imagine how much he would do as a mind for a young guard like Jeremiah Fears, and instilling confidence in him and his growth and development in the league as he enters year 2. Funny enough, another local Chicagoland product. And they just need somebody that's young, I think, that's able to relate to some guys and show them what it's like to be pros, and not only necessarily what it's like to be pros, but can work with them on like player development things, which I think Rondo excels tremendously well at. Like, I would love to see him get that opportunity.
Yeah, Rondo's the obvious choice, as you mentioned, for his mind. Because not only being a former point guard, but if you ever watch Rondo on a court, he directs traffic with things away from the ball with other players, putting guys in the right positions, setting screens off the ball, so on and so forth. And when you have guys like Zion Williamson, Derek Queen, guys who can handle the ball, create, make plays from others outside of just being point guards, you got guys like Jordan Poole, Trey Murphy. You have a lot of talent on that team, but someone has to pull it all together and make it make sense. And if you can't get that veteran point guard in there, the next best option would be to bring him in as a head coach. And if it's not Rajon Rondo, then you go a little older and get a guy like Sam Cassell.
Yeah, no, I like those picks for sure. Rondo, obviously, with the connection to the Pelicans as a former player. I think one day he's going to be an incredible head coach, whether it's with New Orleans or somewhere down the road. And Sam Cassell is totally overdue for a head coaching position. I would go for Thiago Splitter. I think it's kind of odd. I mean, it's obviously the ownership thing that he's not keeping that job in Portland, but he really did everything that you could have asked for with that team, and I feel like he's probably the best head coach on the market as a result. But I wouldn't mind taking a little bit of a risk with a first-time head coach in Rondo. His experience as a player, especially a player of that style, speaks for itself, and I think he would be a really awesome hire. And then you look at Darvin Ham, who looks to be the front runner based off some of the reporting right now. I think he's probably the most likely candidate. Him or Steve Hetzel from the Nets. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Apologies if not, but looks like those two are the front runners. I think it will be one of those two as a result. But I would personally try to go get Tiago after seeing what he did with the Blazers. But yeah, I think we can wrap up the show here. Before we officially close things out, though, I just want to give you guys a chance to plug your work. Tell our listeners where they can find you at.
Hey, you can find us at Instagram, Twitter at TNTF underscore. Our email is tntfpod@gmail.com. And we drop episodes every Wednesday throughout the course of the regular season and playoffs at rss.com/podcast/TNTF. Definitely got a lot on the horizon coming down the pipeline as well, from playoffs and beyond. So continue to just stay up to speed with what we got, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, check us out at TNTF, as Gabe said, every Wednesday. We drop new episodes of the new 24. And if you scroll down the feed, you'll see other series we've had as well. Faces of the League, our Second Chance Point series, where we have episodes covering Derrick Rose's career, Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade, the Redeem Team, What's the Better Path, College, G League, International. We have a lot of interesting basketball conversations throughout the year. We never stop. We don't have any off seasons at the new 24. And shout out to the Cassels Cast family, all the listeners, and Eamon himself for having us on as well.
Definitely.
Absolutely, I appreciate you guys hopping on the show today. And for our listeners, make sure to go check these guys out. They do some great work. But yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace out.